Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. In this episode, we discuss what to do when we come face to face with the seemingly insurmountable challenges some of our students face just getting to school. Listening to this conversation again, I realized just how big and overwhelming student attendance risk factors can be when we think about things like mental health needs, addictions, and poverty, just to name a few of them. And I think learning and understanding more about this helps to clarify your role in student attendance and helps you to focus on what you can do, not on what you can't influence. So if you're currently dealing with huge issues that many of your students face, then this podcast is for you because it can really help you to focus on your role in student attendance. Some of the things we talk about, just listening to students can open up connections. Students won't care what you know till they know you care, and you may not hear about the impact you've had until much later. At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you can find free restorative resources. And if you enjoy this episode, make sure you subscribe. Now, let's head over to this discussion with Shelley, Steve, and me, Stan. When educational staff are facing situations that are as serious as addictions, mental health, poverty, it's very difficult to decide what you can even do as an educator to help. And so we want to have a bit of a discussion about how can we have any kind of an impact on students when we're facing such overwhelming problems.
Yeah, I think, it is overwhelming. And when we're talking about attendance, and that attendance is the symptom of other things that might be going on in their life, educators understand that and know that. And then those other things going on in their life can seem insurmountable. And where do I fit in there to support the student? This isn't my role. This isn't my education. Where do I fit in here? So is it hands off because I might make things worse? Or what do I say or do? And my response to that is always, you do what you can. You think about those things we've talked about as far as connecting with kids and smiling and welcoming them, all those kind of pieces, because that's what you can do without any special degrees, etc. And we never know the impact we're having with students on a
Isn't
day-to-day
that
basis.
isn't that the truth
It
though? We
is. It
just
is.
don't know the impact of those small things.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't find out for years afterwards. They come back after high school or university and they've gone on to things that you would never have even imagined when you had them back in grade 5 or 6 or 7. And sometimes they'll say it was because of this person or that person or you, but sometimes there's an influencing adult in their life. I was going to go back to Shelley to what you were saying. And when we talk a lot about the mental health issues and what can we do, sometimes just listening is enough. A student struggling, the things that are going on in their lives and their families' lives that are beyond our jurisdiction, if you will, or even our ability, they just need somebody to talk and somebody to listen to them. If you give them 20 minutes of your time, just let it all out and talk about it. And the most you can simply do is be a good listener. Sometimes that's all they really need to get through
Or
a day.
right?
Or want to get through a day and feel a little bit better. Oh, somebody's finally listened to me without judgment, without giving me advice, without telling me this is what you need to do, just simply listening. It's a bit of your time, but it's something that we could all learn to do. And it might make a difference in a kid's day or week or month.
It's so critical, I think, to be a good listener, but to listen to understand, not to fix. And I know that for myself as a teacher too, I want to fix things, and I actually have to consciously stop that tendency to want to fix things for someone else and to simply listen. And that's actually a big deal for students.
And we may have answers. We may have knowledge of what to do next. But again, is that what this person's wanting right now?
And I think of the quote and I had it on my desk, and I saw a teacher that had it on her desk for years. They won't care what you know till they know that you care. And that's when they know if you become that caring adult that is safe for them to come and say, can I just talk to you? And they let you know what's going on in their lives. But you've got to build that relationship beforehand. They're not going to come to you when you've never met them before. They're not going to come to you when you don't even know their first name. So you got to do all those pieces that we talked about before to build those relationships, to become that caring adult in their lives, so that when there is a problem in their lives, when there is a crisis, they feel confident in coming to you, and then you'll listen to them.
I always go back to, I mean, you guys were talking about seeing students as they've gotten older, and it's particularly we generally don't look much different than when we were with them. And so they recognize us, but 10 years a student can look very different, particularly males. All of a sudden you're greeted with this big smile in a parking lot, and they're so excited to see you. And you're scrambling to figure out who they are because they look so different from when they were 14. But clearly you've had some impact, and you're somebody that feels good to them, right? And that's not understanding that necessarily you had what you said or what you did when they were 14 isn't what they're remembering. They're now remembering at 24 that you were somebody that was positive in their life that made them feel good. And this isn't my quote, this is Maya Angelou, but it's a quote that rings true, and it's not new to people, but it's one to keep in mind. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that, if we can keep that in our minds when we're thinking about students with these really big life things going on, and many of them are huge. And the other piece of that is remembering these kids are still coming to school or making connections. And that is amazing in itself. So be the person that they remember, and that was somebody that was positive and open and welcoming. This teacher and I talked a lot about how she could support one student in particular. And this was, she was probably 16, 17-year-old who had a lot of the issues we're talking about right now. Some socioeconomic issues, there's addiction issues in her family. She had dabbled in some drugs, but she was really at a crux now of, is she leaving her family situation to make things better for herself? And this teacher had done a Y while she was talking to her, Y, like she was at a Y in the road. And while they were having the conversation, you're at this point, you're going to make the decision whether you're going that way or you're going this way, with support, obviously. And so they had that conversation. This young lady chose to leave the home, and with support and continued conversations, I found out that she had hung on to this little scrap of paper this teacher had drawn this Y on, and had put it up on her mirror or somewhere she could see it each day. And that teacher had no idea when she was drawing the visual out that it was going to have that level of impact for that student, that she kept it up there as a guide for her in her day-to-day choices.
So it's little things like that in conversations that can have a huge impact. And the thing is, you don't always know the impact that you can have on students. And so when you're facing situations where things look overwhelming for students in terms of mental health, addictions, poverty, to simply continue to do those little things to impact those students in positive ways. And that can make a big differences you may never even hear about.
We could tell stories all day about kids that we've known that have gone on to things that you never thought they would. And I've had some kids that were just absolute horrible situations that have gone on to become very successful, far more than anybody ever would have thought about or given them credit for.
But what I think it's important to remember is that we are going to have impact.
Mm.
We're in front of these students many hours a day, so we're going to have an impact. So it's really up to us to make it a positive impact as opposed to another negative impact in their world.
I can think of one story, a student, I'll just call him JV. And as a principal, I had him in my office a fair bit, and there were a lot of discipline concerns, but major family issues at home, poverty, just social skill difficulties. He was able to make it through grade 8, and years later, probably 8 or 10 years after he graduated, out of the blue, I get a call, and he says, "Hey, Mr. Baker, it's JV." I said, "Hey, JV, how are you?" And he goes, "I just want you to know that my dad died, and I want you to come to the wake." And I said, "Absolutely." Now, I had no idea, first of all, that I had made any kind of a connection with him or had any kind of an impact. And here he was calling me. He called me, and he called the grade 1 teacher, and he called the kindergarten teacher. And the three of us all showed up at the wake. Gifts we can give them is our time and our attention. Listening without judgment means more to our students than you might think. Find out more about our work, www.restorative.ca. Email me, stan@restorative.ca. And let's give the gifts of our time and attention to students who struggle with attending school.